So I already told you why this is a special episode for me. I really appreciate the fact we're sitting here in your house, which is kind of a little surreal.
Uh-huh.
And like I said, exactly the type of house. This is the place I sort of imagined you
How
writing these
so?
books. You know what? Writers often, I don't know what it is, but I've been to several writers' homes. And first of all, of course, there's books everywhere because you're researching everything. Usually there's some other form of creative expression, like a piano, like you've got in the corner. Whether you use it or not, I don't
Well, we
know.
do. My wife she sings and plays the piano.
There you go. So they're often married to, or with other creative
Yeah.
people. And then I figured you must do a lot of, your books are, as big as a phone book half the time, or at
Yeah.
least a 90s phone book. I don't know if
Yeah.
they still make those. Maybe they're thinner now.
Yeah.
And so I know that there's a lot of research. And so I know that there's going to be books, records, outdoor space for you to walk around is kind of exactly how I imagine.
Because some people come over and they're a bit surprised because they think of me as this kind of extremely wealthy sort of asshole who has a really big, obnoxious modern home. And they're kind of surprised that it's like this.
They think
they're
that
expecting that I'm some Hollywood celebrity with a large glass house, modern and everything.
Well, that's flattering, and they must. It's because they enjoy your work so much. They assume you sold so much that you live in a lair now.
Yeah, I guess.
I think the 48 Laws of Power might have branded you a little bit as like, wow, if he's using all these, he lives in a cave with like nuclear missiles.
Oh, is that right?
I think that might be part of it. You live in a volcano lair kind of thing. Yeah,
Okay.
could be the 48 Laws of Power. I'm just throwing that out there.
Okay.
No longitudinal study.
Well, I
has
liked
been done.
your description of what you were anticipating. That was pretty accurate.
Yeah, so I'm just sort of patting myself on the back for having guessed that, I
Okay.
think. I loved The Laws of Human Nature. I read the whole thing in about a week, devoured it, which is no small task. On Audible, it's about 28 and a half hours long, 29 hours.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, apology accepted. Everybody else, don't worry. 29 hours goes by like that. It's fine. What I loved about this, though, was not, and I think a lot of people grab this from the 48 Laws of Power. They go, oh, well, it's all about manipulation and stuff like that. And you hear people that book was big, I think, in a lot of prisons. People were passing it around. Rappers, yeah, football players and things like that. And kind of people that you would expect to be using those levers. When I look at the Laws of Human Nature, there is a lot of that, but I look at it as, if we don't understand these laws, these are the fundamental concepts that push and pull us as humans.
Right.
We have to understand this about ourselves so that we're not taken advantage of by others. And we also need to understand our own weaknesses and vulnerabilities so that either we can find out when they're getting triggered or we can possibly eliminate them. Does that sort of jibe with your understanding of these materials?
Yeah, I think it comes from a place of, I like to poke holes in people's pretensions. I've been doing that for a long time. I did that kind of indirectly with the 48 Laws because prior to that book, I was working in Hollywood, and everyone sort of likes to pretend that they're so liberal, so PC, they're so angelic in favor of all the right causes, and it's not true. Behind the doors, they're master manipulators, they're Machiavellian, they're pretty rough. And I was really irritated by that stupid image that people have of this film director or that actor. And I wanted to show, this is what power is really like. This is what people are really like. To sort of prick that bubble of pretentiousness, of that air of superiority. And so this book comes from a similar place. We're all flawed. We all evolved from the same roots, and we can't control who we are to a large extent. So some of the things that are most obvious and egregious about that, like the fact that we feel very powerful emotions, they overwhelm us, and we act stupid when we're overwhelmed by powerful emotions often, is very human. And some people like to exempt themselves. They go, oh, I'm not narcissistic, that's the other person. Mm-hmm. I'm never aggressive, I'm just so sweet, it's other people who are aggressive. I never feel envy, that's other people, on and on and on. And I just wanted to attack that because this is who we are. It's not to be depressing. It's actually, if you don't realize, if you don't have self-awareness, you can't possibly change yourself. everybody wants to think they can change themselves. That's why self-help books sell so well, you know? That's why Tony Robbins could sell 120,000 books in 1 week, as Ryan told me.
Wow.
But the thing is, a lot of that I believe is nonsense, a lot of what's written, because it's not realistic. You're not seeing who people really are. You're not digging underneath and getting at what really motivates human behavior. So I wanted a very realistic, brutal look at the human animal. It's not all negative. We have some positive traits. But once you realize, oh, I am capable of feeling envy. Oh, I am irrational at times. Oh, I have a dark side. With that awareness, you can actually finally start to change yourself instead of going around in circles or deluding yourself that you are changing when in fact you're not.
Yeah, I think
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, absolutely it does. I can very well attest to the fact that people are emotional and stupid. I feel like I have a lot of personal experience with that.
Well, so do I. Even I'm not exempt from that.
And we're all pulled by our emotions. We relate to other people based on our emotions too. We're pulled, we're not relating to each other personally. We're sort of relating to each other based on this emotional feeling that we have that we've built up over decades prior. And in the laws of human nature, you discussed, look, the person you're meeting, the person you're interacting with, they're kind of this wad of coagulated emotional baggage, for lack of a better word,
Right.
that's built up from their childhood through their
Right.
teenage years. And then this is what we're projecting onto the world, and that's who we're meeting in our day-to-day lives. And you actually said this is liberating. Why do you feel like that's liberating?
What is liberating? The knowledge?
The idea that we're just emotion balls bouncing around the world and not really relating to one another personally on a real level.
Oh, I see what you mean. Well, the liberating fact is you go around thinking everything is personal. Wow, that person was cold to me in that meeting. God damn, they don't like me. They're a bitch. I don't like, something's fucking wrong with her, you know? You go around, everything is personal. Oh, why did he say that? Why is my mom telling me this, blah, blah, blah. And I'm telling you, it's not personal. That's the liberating fact. People are wrapped up in their own emotions, their own traumas. They're reliving things from their childhood. They get angry at you, but you're not really the trigger. The trigger is something that happened to them when they were 4 or 5 or 20 or whatever. So to realize that it's not personal, that people are acting out of their own dramas, their own traumas, their own emotional problems from way back, should kind of take all the burdens away from you. So you don't have to react and take things personally. It's extremely liberating to be rid of all of that emotional baggage that you assume from other people, thinking that they have something against you, or that they're reacting about something personal. So that's the liberating aspect. But the thing is, we're social animals to the core, right? You wouldn't be here talking without all the billions of people who created language before you, without your education, without your parents, without your teachers. They have molded you. They have made you who you are. So we are not really individuals. We are built by other people by being social. We're kind of a conglomerate of all these other interactions of relationships. And so we're really generally kind of bad at this aspect of life because we don't understand other people. We assume that we take like a sort of a simple snapshot of people. They're nice, they're not nice, they're pleasant, they're not pleasant, they're smart or not smart. But people are infinitely complicated, complex. They have a wealth of emotions. They're going through things that you're not even beginning to see. And if you can begin to pierce their mask and get inside their psychology and understand where they're coming from, suddenly the whole game changes. And what you say and how you act with them will change as well. And you will find your relationships are much more smoother. Your bonds with people will be much deeper. And you'll be able to deal with those ugly, toxic types that inevitably cross your path.
I think being in LA right now, which is kind of the West Coast headquarters of
Toxicity.
lower human nature, if you will. Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
Yes, very nice place you have here. But
it's true.
But we do see a lot of that here. We see it in every big city, of course. I think LA gets the rap for that on west of the Mississippi, possibly.
Yeah.
And the book actually helps us focus on our higher nature so that we can avoid succumbing to the... I feel like the lower nature really pulls on us.
Yeah.
It's sort of the default. If we just sit in our inner tube with our hands behind our head and crack open a six-pack of beer, the river of dark nature takes us towards that waterfall of the shadow.
Yeah. Well, think of it this way. Let's say you want to make something in life. You want to start a business. You want to write a book. You want to create a podcast. It takes a lot of work, and that work isn't fun, right? It involves a lot of tedious detail. Mm-hmm. It involves dealing with people who aren't listening to you. They don't immediately respond to your idea. You have to deal with frustration, and you have to be disciplined. That's not fun, right? And our default position in life is to always want things to be fun and easy, right? We take the path of least resistance. So when we're children, if we weren't educated, if we didn't have teachers or parents telling us to study, we'd be these monsters. I think it was the poet Coleridge that compared it to a garden that's never tended and it just turns into weeds. That's what children would become if there was nobody educating them. That's who we would become if there was nobody instilling in us a sense of discipline. So when you're working as a 12-year-old, 13-year-old, developing a work ethic and discipline, you're actually tapping into what I call your higher nature. We admire the fact that great buildings were built, great bridges, and our cities are marvels of technology, and we have museums and all this. That was built by people who were masters at their field, who delved into who connected to this higher nature. They were disciplined, they worked hard, they put their energy into their work, not into getting attention and not into their ego. And so that is the higher nature that all of us have as the potential. And whenever you stop thinking about yourself and start putting your mind into your work or put your mind into other people and their problems, you're tapping into that higher nature. And it feels good, it feels fulfilling. It doesn't feel fulfilling to go home, smoke pot, and play a video game. It's kind of fun and it's kind of mindless, I don't deny that. But the next day you don't feel like, there's no sense of accomplishment.
Yeah, true.
There's no sense of, wow, I'm doing something, I'm building something. And we want that feeling. So that is the higher nature that I'm talking about. And I'm trying to bring that out in this book. At the end of every chapter, which you could sort of say is slightly negative, narcissism, irrationality, on and on. The chapter is about kind of a slight flaw in our chemistry, right? But at the end of each chapter, I show how you can take that and turn it around, how you can take the lower nature and turn it into something positive.
Right.
To give you a simple example, I believe we humans naturally feel envy. Everybody feels envy. We don't like to admit it. I'm envious that Ryan sold more, is listed higher on the business bestseller list on Amazon than I am.
Ryan Holiday, who was just here.
Yeah.
And you kind of mentored him early on. He fixed your Wikipedia page. He was a kid.
Yeah.
He still is, actually.
And now he's outshone me. Anyway, I can admit that I feel envy. And so I want you to get to that same place. Mm-hmm. And where it comes from is, it's the chimpanzee in us. It's been shown that primates are very attuned to other animals in their clan, and they're constantly comparing themselves. Who's the alpha chimp? Who has more than I have? We are, by our nature, the way our minds work, continually comparing ourselves to other people who, they have a better job, they're making more money, their book is selling more, etc. And that's the source of envy, right? I mean, that's deep underneath the source of envy. But that constant comparing to people, which is so endemic on social media, has the potential to be turned into something positive. It can turn into the desire to compete and instead of envying what that other person has, to actually achieve it for yourself and to emulate great people and try and, instead of envying some really good writer, why don't I become that good writer and sell enough books so I don't have to feel envy? I try and show other ways how that comparing mechanism can actually tap into our higher nature.
Envy was the chapter that hit me the hardest. I actually just scrolled way down in my iPad notes here because I thought, we may or may not get to this.
Okay.
This chapter really spoke to me, and I'm almost ashamed to admit it, which actually is something you predict in the chapter on envy, is that it's this emotion where we're so ashamed of it, and we're so good at hiding it because we're ashamed of it that even when we feel it, we go, oh, I'm feeling anger. I'm feeling self-righteousness. I'm feeling my sense of justice wants to take this person down because they're bad.
Right.
Really, it's like, why does he have a jet and I don't? But then we
Right.
go, that can't be it. I'm not a child. I don't feel
Right.
that way. I don't think that way.
Right.
I must be reaching up for something else because I don't want to think of myself as this lowly, envious
Right.
jerk face. You know,
Right.
I want to think I'm above this. So
Right.
it comes out as another emotion, which makes it harder for us to be aware of in the moment and shine a light on it
Right.
and scrub it out.
Right.
So it's particularly insidious and dangerous, I think, for a lot of people, especially people who are achieving something, because we're the ones that really, and I should just speak for myself, we're the ones that really think we're above that. We've worked on that. That's not an issue for us, so we don't have to think about it anymore. And yet we're probably the people that feel it's some of the strongest because we're just one rung closer on the ladder. Where that brass ring is just right within reach for a lot of us.
Well, leaders, people who have attained the heights of power, are constantly feeling envy. I talk in the book. I have a chapter that Michael Eisner is sort of the icon for of grandiosity. And he was the man who was so powerful, who ran this mega entertainment conglomerate, who had everything he wanted. And he had somebody working for him, Jeffrey Katzenberg, who was the head of the Disney studio. And Eisner was riddled with envy for him because he thought that more attention was suddenly going to Katzenberg than to me. People suddenly saw him as the golden boy. And yet he was his boss. So bosses are often feeling envy for people who are below them. So if people who have attained the heights of power are riddled with envy, you can imagine what's happening to everybody else.
Right.
You know, oftentimes in life, somebody will do kind of a surprisingly ugly, nasty turn to us. They'll sabotage our work. They'll say something ugly behind our back. They'll literally manipulate us in some way. And we'll get drawn into the emotions of that all. And we'll go, what an asshole. Or, you know, and we don't really understand where it came from. And most of the time where it does actually come from is envy.
Yeah.
And we can't unravel that knot because we didn't see it originally. So I try and show you in the book, I don't want to make you paranoid, but I make the distinction between active and passive envy. Passive envy is what we feel every day naturally. As we look on Facebook and we see other people are having a great vacation, we go, God, their life is better than mine, damn it. We feel that every day and we need to admit it. It's very human. And we don't do it, doesn't lead to anything bad necessarily. Active envy can happen to anybody, but generally there are people who are envier types, and I describe them in that chapter. And they're prone to feeling such strong envy that they act on it. They not only just sort of feel it, they give you a comment that is targeted to make you feel bad.
Right.
You know? Like I remember early on when the 48 Laws of Power, people would say, boy, Robert, you know, that book must be selling really well. You must be making a lot of money with it. And it was sort of a form of praise, but hidden behind it was this idea that I was kind of soulless, that I was writing it for money.
Right. They're deliberately cheapening
Yeah.
your accomplishment by relating it to something base like,
Yeah.
oh, congrats on winning an Oscar. Now you'll get a lot of higher paid roles. Or
Right.
so it's like, well, I did a good job in that, but thanks for ignoring that part.
Right. And so, you know, a couple things will happen. You'll start to internalize it. You go, maybe they're right. Maybe there's something wrong with me. Or you'll kind of attack them or whatever. But what you don't realize is that it comes from a place of envy. They actually envy you. And if you know that, you can prepare and make sure that you don't become friends with them. And you can also not take it so personally. You can see where it's really coming from.
I had a friend, this is an example that you gave in the book as well. Somebody will praise something after you've lost it. And I had a friend who, back during the mortgage crisis, had an amazing place. And we used to go there and hang out, and it was really, really nice. And then he couldn't pay the mortgage. He was underwater, kind of let that whole thing go. And one of our other friends said, oh man, that was such an amazing house. What a shame. And I thought, how tone deaf are you, man? You know, you don't need to kick the guy
Right.
when he's down. And they're like, what? I was complimenting the house. The one he doesn't have anymore that we used to hang out in all the time. You don't think that? And then we sort of noticed this pattern with this guy where he was actually, he didn't enjoy doing nice things with us. He resented doing nice things with us, and we had to quickly sort of surgically remove him.
How did you notice this?
We started to be aware of the pattern because I remember that comment in particular, even years later. And the same guy, the guy who'd lost his house, was pretty offended by that because he was feeling a lot of emasculation from not being able to pay his mortgage.
Right.
And he was dating a girl at the time who then they broke up, and he suspected, oh, is it because I lost the house? And I thought, there's probably a million things there, but you're focused on that. And this guy made a comment about that relationship. And then I would go and date somebody, and he'd be like, oh, I didn't know that Mr. Confident dated ugly women. Ha ha. And I was just like, he's always kind of just digging right out from underneath you.
And people like that will tend to disguise it. They'll tend to disguise it as it's just their humor.
Right.
They're just a sarcastic type. Oh, you took it personally. Can't you take a joke?
Right.
But it doesn't come from just a jolly joie de vivre. It comes from, an ugly place, a place where they want to hurt you. And, we might say that, well, this is kind of minor stuff. But you let somebody like that around you a lot with their little barbs all the time, it gets under your skin and it starts to weigh you down, and it kind of gives you some emotional baggage. That can be kind of toxic. And then there are people who do nasty things from a place of envy that can ruin your life for years, In the 48 Laws of Power, I had a chapter on envy. It was called Never Appear Too Perfect. And I have the story of this writer whose partner was so envious of him and his success because they were both wanting to be writers. It was Joe Orton. They ended up murdering him.
Jeez, okay,
now, I know that's a little extreme.
Yeah.
But, I had the example in this book of the relationship between a writer, Mary Shelley, and a friend, Jane Williams, who kind of ruined everything in her life, her relationship with her husband and her friends, out of envy. So this can be kind of dangerous.
One of the examples in the book about how to spot envy in others that I thought was really good was when somebody gives you advice and it sounds really well reasoned, but it's a really bad course of action. And you kind of go, that doesn't sound like a good idea, but he's so convincing.
Right.
And sometimes it's just counterintuitive advice, maybe, but other times maybe it's designed to make you fall down the stairs, but it's just really well polished.
Well, people who are envious, I trace it to childhood. There's a great writer, Melanie Klein, a psychoanalyst, who said that there are children who are envious children. They're greedy, envious children. They envy the attention that other siblings are getting, right? And they go through life becoming enviers. But people like that have learned over the years to disguise their envy. They have to disguise it in some way, because if they show it, it'll turn people off, and they'll have, they'll be very limited in what they can get in life. So these are masters at disguising the signs of their envy. So they'll do things like that. They'll give you advice that is meant to kind of confuse you or throw you off or lead you down the wrong path, on and on. There are myriad disguises that enviers have, and I try and show all of them. I mean, one thing that I think is really critical is that I talk a lot in this book about nonverbal communication, because I think it's a huge area in social interactions that we normally don't pay attention to. People give off a lot of information by their body language, by their looks, by their tone of voice, and enviers often can be unmasked by their micro expressions, by their tone of voice. They may be praising you and saying something good, but their tone of voice is kind of cold, and it's made to make you wonder whether there's something else going on. Or you'll detect, so I have an example here of a way to test this, whether you're dealing with an envier. If you tell them some good news about yourself, you'll see a flash of disappointment in their eyes. It'll only last like half a second, and they'll quickly cover it over. Or if you say something bad that has happened to you, you'll see a slight smile that crosses their face, Or people who gossip a lot, That's another kind of disguise of envy. They're saying bad things about other people, and we all love gossip, and it's kind of juicy and fun.
Right.
But it's a way to disguise the fact that they really envy the people that they're trying to bring down.
Yeah, I think there is kind of, maybe it's not a fine line, but it seems like there's a lot of people who say, hey, did you hear that Jim got his car towed last week? And it's like, oh, that's kind of funny. But then I guess there's sometimes people who go, hey, did you hear that Jordan is, his wife is really ill or something? And it's like, wow, that's bad news for just all around. There's no kind of glimmer there. But then you do find some people that they love spreading the really nasty stuff. And it's like, it's a little uncomfortable, I think, if you're not that type of person.
Yeah.
Because it's just a little bit too bad of news to be shared widely.
Well, think of it. If you have a friend and you heard that their podcast or book, whatever, got some negative reviews, nasty reviews, would you be the first one to go and tell them? What would be your first reaction? Your first reaction would be, I want to kind of shelter them. I don't want them to hear about this, or I want to break it to them in a nice way. Your first reaction isn't, God damn, I got to share this bad piece of bad news with them. You feel bad for them.
Yeah, I guess it depends on how bad the review is. But yeah, if it's a new show and somebody writes, this guy shouldn't be doing a show, I'd probably say, look, you're going to see this eventually. Don't listen to this idiot.
Okay.
There's going to be 800 people that love what you're doing. You're only going to hear from the negatives.
Well, you can tell the difference between that and an envier by the fact that they don't qualify it like that, and that the fact that there's a almost slight bit of joy that they have in reporting this bad news to you, right? So I got that. I get that all the time where people, when somebody is in a hurry to tell me bad news, I think there's something else going on,
That's interesting. In a hurry to tell you bad news. I'm thinking of all the people in my life right now that call me on Saturday night to go, by the way, did you hear about either someone else or, hey, guess what? I've got something that I could have told you on Monday that's going to be disappointing, but I thought I would deliver it to you at 8 p.m. on a Saturday night just because you're probably in the middle of your
Who
weekend.
are these people?
Yeah, I mean, I know some people like that, And now I'm like, what other things are they doing? Because usually these same people, they've got kind of clumps of behavior where I go, why do I put up with this guy? Why does this is the guy barfed in my car for the third time because he can't control his drinking? What is with this person?
Right.
Or this is the guy who's always late. They clearly don't respect my time. And it just so happens to be the same guy who might do the 8 p.m. here's some bad news call.
Yeah.
And it's strange because they're the same people. Some of these same people are super generous in other ways, but I think they can't help themselves. Is that possible?
Yes, I think that's possible. And a lot of that I would call more like the passive envy type. First of all, people are complicated. So no one ever really feels pure envy, right? It's always mixed with other things. I want you to get over your simplified idea of people. Their anger is not just purely anger. Their love and affection can also be mixed with a bit of resentment and hatred and envy. So people are more complex than you think. And I have the story that I used in the book of a woman who befriended this writer in order to kind of sabotage her in the end. But mixed in with her desire, her envy, was actual admiration, was actually a bit of affection. So that can be doubly confusing.
That's so strange.
And in fact, envy is most common among friends and among people in the same profession. And you don't really expect it from friends, you expect something else. Yeah, so the friends who are telling you these things, they can still be your friends, they can still be nice and generous, but there's also an undercurrent where they're envying your success. And in that kind of situation, I kind of preach tolerance. I don't think you should necessarily break off a relationship or, think that this person is going to ruin your life in some way, unless you have signs that there's something else going on. I believe you should just sort of accept it. This is what we were talking about, the liberating aspect. I'm doing really well, me, Jordan Harbinger, my show's doing well, I'm successful, etc. And maybe they're not doing so well, or maybe they have things in their life that's not clicking, and they're feeling some envy. All right, I'm not going to take it personally. I'm going to have the appeal to my higher self. I'm not going to get drawn into their drama and getting all emotionally perturbed about it. So that's another aspect of it.
You have the 5 envy types in the book. I thought these were fascinating. We don't have to go over all of them. People can buy the book. We're going to link to it in the show notes.
Right.
It is a long book. We can't possibly go over everything.
Right.
But I loved the idea that there are these different types of envious people or enviers. I don't know if that's a noun.
It's a word I used.
Enviers?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Good. Then we're on,
I don't know.
we're on the same page there. The one that really struck me was the leveler, where
Yeah.
it's, I'm just trying to make sure everyone's getting their fair shake by bringing down the guy who got to the top in some unfair
Right.
way. And I'm
Right.
like, crap. That sometimes, when my envy comes out, it sometimes comes out like that, where I love busting frauds and scammers, especially if they're taking people for a ride.
Right.
But I think the origin of that is, look at this guy who got a jet by screwing people over. I'm not just trying to protect the little guy. There is a lot of that.
Yeah.
But part of it is, look, if I could have gotten a jet if I was just an unscrupulous bastard, but then I'd be an unscrupulous bastard. So
Right.
I've got it out for that guy.
Right. So what you're doing there is you're looking at yourself and you're digging underneath and seeing maybe that the root of it was this little pang of envy that you were feeling. And that's very important to be able to do that. And it's not easy. You have to be kind of brutally honest with yourself.
It's uncomfortable.
It's uncomfortable. But the leveler is a type that generally is quite sarcastic, can have a very good sense of humor, and they seem to have a high sense of justice. They're always after the big guy. They're for the underdog. They want to right this wrong, etc. And there are people who are genuinely like that, who are good at that, but it isn't mixed with this kind of savage humor, this kind of sarcasm. And so a lot of people like this, they're just, I say enviers wear disguises. This is a disguise of, I just want everybody to be the same.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like people who are successful because I think they're ripping people off. And it can seem kind of like a good appearance, that's a good person. They're for the underdog. But really at the root of it is some ugly, ugly envy. And they can cross your path and you'll find that that sarcasm is suddenly directed at you. Mm-hmm. And it can kind of, have an effect, a bad effect.
I've got to keep it in check a lot. Luckily,
Oh, for you?
Yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've got to keep it in check, myself in check a lot, I guess. And my wife does a good job with that too, where sometimes she'll be like, you've just crossed the line. She says this in a more tactful way, but it's kind of like, you just crossed the line from being like, look at this thing that this person's doing that's bad, to you're kind of obsessing over this thing that this person's doing that's bad. It doesn't affect you.
Right.
Maybe you should go take a cold shower on
But the thing is, what I want is, I don't want people to be weighed down by this book and to feel guilty. Oh man, I'm such a bad person, I'm feeling envy. The fact that that happens to you is totally human and totally natural. And it shouldn't depress you or make you feel like you've got to completely change yourself. Just by the fact that you're aware of it is almost enough, So it won't turn into this sort of ugly, active envy that I'm talking about. But most of the people around you who are ugly enviers have no self-awareness. They don't think of themselves as ever feeling envy. They feel that their sabotaging you is justified because they've convinced themselves that you're an asshole that deserves something bad. But the fact that you can recognize the root of it is already enough to prevent you from going into that deep, ugly place.
So if we can't really get rid of it, we can just become aware of it. How do we get closer to what we envy to generate that awareness? Do you have any idea how we can implement this? There's somebody listening right now or watching right now that's going, oh shoot, I've done this to my brother, sister, niece, nephew, child, husband, coworker. This is me.
Yeah. Well, what do you exactly ask?
I would love to find out how people can shine a light on this and generate self-awareness. Is it just looking or reading the book, looking at this interview and going, okay, I do that? Because I feel like there's another step in there where people go, I'm not doing that. That person really is bad. I'm not envious. He's a scumbag. Why would I envy him?
Well, you have to be first willing to be honest with yourself.
Sure.
And to want to change this part of your character. But, look at these sort of strong moments in your life where you really hated somebody and maybe you acted on it, or you said something kind of insulting to a person. We've all done that. And you will tell yourself originally they triggered it by their actions.
I was just going to say, I have done that, but they deserved it.
Right. I want you to go back
Sure.
and start seeing what might have been a different scenario where you might have felt a pang of envy. So as you say, even with the con artist who con people, there's a degree of, God damn, that guy got away with it. That's pretty neat. That's pretty interesting, you know. There's always usually a root of that, even with somebody that you hate or really despise for some reason. That there's a little spark of envy where you kind of admire the fact that they got away with something that you couldn't get away with. So you got to dig back and look at the actual causes of it, but look at those moments in your life in which you felt a very powerful negative emotion towards a person, and try and see if going kind of reverse engineering it, you can go back to the moment and see the original sense of envy that you might have had. Keep this in mind. An ancient writer going back like to 7th century BC, Hesiod, said, "The potter envies the potter, the writer envies the writer." And what it means is you're going to envy people who are in the same situation or boat as you. I don't envy my carpenter who got a great new job working on a house because I'm terrible with my hands. I could care less. I'm happy for him. But a writer who's suddenly 55 on Amazon while I'm at 77, I'm going to feel envy for. So look at the people in your profession. Your dislike of that fellow artist or that other podcaster, 99% sure that it comes from a place of envy.
For sure, yeah.
Right? So those are kind of signs of it. And then from there, from that place, and that degree of honesty, I give you tips and strategies for how to alter that envy into another dynamic. So for instance, you're always envying people who have more than you, who are doing better than you. But there's billions of people on this planet who are doing a lot worse than you, right? The opposite of envy is gratitude, where you feel grateful for what you had as opposed to envying what other people have. And without getting too Pollyannish about it, you can always feel grateful for the fact that you're alive, that you're healthy, that you've got your brains and your wits about you, that you've got a decent job, that you have some people in your life. Why don't you look at the people who have a lot less than you, and instead of feeling envy for those who are better, why don't you feel grateful for what you have?
So we downward compare instead of upward compare.
Yes.
That will trigger the gratitude. Because I think for a lot of us, especially in the social media age, we're just comparing and I say this a lot to the audience, that we're comparing our blooper reel to their highlight reel. We're comparing us sitting on the toilet feeling sick, on a hangover Sunday with someone's Instagram feed where they're in Bali surfing and the picture's been airbrushed and color corrected, and we go, my life sucks.
Well, that's the other thing I try to say. That's another tip in there in that chapter. People are not nearly as happy and successful as you think they are. Mm-hmm. They only present those happy moments on Bali on their Facebook feed. They're not showing the angry little bitter fight that they had with their girlfriend 2 hours before, in which she left, saying, "Wait, you asshole, I'm leaving you," kind of thing. They're doctoring their image that they present to show the best parts of their life. I talk in the book about how, we always envy really wealthy people. And who was the wealthiest person in the world in the 1960s? Was Aristotle Onassis. And I read about him in this Jacqueline Kennedy biography. He was the most miserable man on the planet. He was so fucking insecure. He was just a nightmare to deal with. So if his billions couldn't buy him just an ounce of happiness, then these people that you envy aren't really worth envying, right? They're not really as happy as you think they are.
Yeah. I've talked to a lot of people. Usually I'll get a couple of whiskeys in them or something, and I'll say, what are you struggling with right now? And they usually hesitate to answer. But if you get somebody on a good day and you get an honest answer out of them, it snaps you right out of your envy box a lot.
Right.
And it could be something as simple as, I'm really worried about my mother's health. And you go, oh, geez, well, I'm not. So that's good that I don't have to worry about that. Or just something like, my business isn't doing that well. And I'm thinking, I'm on your yacht right now. What are you talking about? And, it's just, but there's people will worry about all of these things. You have no idea, because they're not going, here's all this stuff that's going wrong in my life.
Right.
You're sitting on their boat. They don't want to bore you with it. They don't want to bring that out. Right. And I think that's been important for me personally to realize, especially as we rebuild the business from zero this year, that I'm going, oh, the progress is so slow. It's quick, but it's slow. And there's other people that have been doing business for 8 years instead of 8 months that are thinking, I wish I could be at the level where you are right now.
That's right.
That's important. The downward comparison is important because we think, why would I downward compare? I'm trying to get there, not there. Why am I looking backwards, not forwards? But you have to do that to stay grounded.
Well, it's a balance. It's a game because you can downward compare and get complacent. Like, well, I'm actually doing fine. You want to be challenged. You want to see people who are doing better and to emulate and to get up to their level. But you don't want that to crush you and to be the only thing that motivates you, because that can be kind of ugly and soulless. You need to get satisfaction from the work itself. But emulating people who have more can be a positive thing, as long as it leads to action, as long as it leads to pouring your energy into your work and not into bringing other people down, right?
Right. Yeah, I completely agree. We cultivate rationality to avoid being led around by our emotions, which are kind of like this bratty child that seems to be...
kind of takes you by the nose and goes like that.
Takes you by the nose, yeah, exactly. And the problem is we think we're rational, a lot of us do anyway, but we're not. And it's a learned and practiced skill. I think a lot of people think, I'm rational, I'm very calm, I'm not emotional, I'm very measured. And sometimes those are the most emotional people around because they have no awareness around this.
Yeah, it's law number 1 of irrationality. It's called master your emotions, because I think it's the most dominant trait of the human animal. I mean, basically, I don't want to bore people with science, but the neuroscience of emotions is kind of interesting. Emotions evolved among animals hundreds, millions of years ago. Reptiles actually have a fear response. They're the first sort of sign of the evolution of emotions. So it's a very, very ancient system, and it's designed to make you aware of a danger or problem in your environment and take action. But animals feel an emotion. There's a chemical, an electrical, bioelectrical process that goes in the body, adrenaline, etc., and then it passes. They feel fear, and 5 minutes later, it's gone. We humans inherited this emotional system. It's part of our brain. It's the lower part of our brain that governs it. But we also have thinking. And what ends up happening to us is we feel that emotion and we can't get rid of it. We feel that fear and it stays with us, and we think about that fear and we think about it, and it turns into an obsessional thought. And this is what turns us irrational. So we think that we have a thought or an idea that just comes from some super out of body type of idea that's just perfect and clear and rational, and we came to it. But in fact, 99% of the time we feel an emotion, anger, joy, excitement, and that emotion causes us to think about it, and in thinking about it we rationalize it and we come up with something to justify our emotions. So when you think you're being rational, you're not being rational at all. You're feeling an emotion and you're thinking about it and you're trying to justify it in some way. You have no access to your emotions. You don't know why you feel anger. It comes up in a part of your brain that is not connected to the cognitive part of the brain. So when you feel that anger, it doesn't say, your brain is not able to go, I can see clearly down to the source of why I'm angry. You have no idea why you're feeling angry. You have no idea why you're suddenly excited by things. It's a mystery to you, and you grab at things immediately in your environment to say, this is what triggered it, this is what caused my anger, this is what made me excited. But you don't know, you're not sure about the source of it. So your emotions are dominating you all of the time. You don't see the source of them. You're not aware of what's actually triggering them. You have a stranger inside of yourself. I call this person the emotional self. You don't understand this person. You're not seeing it. And it's kind of driving your behavior. People in marketing understand this more than anyone. And people who deal with economic behavior. They know that people buy things irrationally and then later explain to themselves why they bought it. There's a standard bit of wisdom in psychology that if you liked something once or bought something once, you are continually prone to buying it again and again and again and again. But you'll justify it to yourself like, I like that product, it's a better product. when in fact it's not a better product, but you are trained to like something once and feel like you were justified in liking it, and therefore you have to like it again. If you were suddenly confronted with the fact that what you bought was an inferior product, it makes you think, well, maybe I'm stupid. Maybe I didn't make a rational choice. Right. You don't want to think like that. So people in marketing know that if they can get you to like something once, you'll keep returning over and over and over again. We are irrational. Our buying habits, what we like, our political choices are governed by our emotions. And if you're going around thinking that you're rational, that this isn't the case, then that's very dangerous. The most dangerous people are those who are convinced that they know what is right and are not aware of how much they're being driven by something that they're not aware of. So I made this law number 1 because I want to drum it into your head. You are not a rational being. Rationality is something you earn. It's a struggle. It takes effort. It takes awareness. You have to go through steps. You have to see your biases. I cover in these chapters various biases. Being aware that you are irrational by nature, you can suddenly start becoming rational. You can suddenly start finding a different way of dealing with your emotions and not letting them govern your life. So for instance, we all have the confirmation bias. I have it as well. When you're trying to write a book or whatever, like I do, I have a bias towards this is what I think human nature is about. So I will go and find the books that confirm what I already believe. If I'm a Trump supporter or a Democrat, I find the news or the information that will confirm what I already want to believe. If you're aware that you are suffering from this confirmation bias, then you can begin to operate against it. I know that I have a negative view of human nature. So what I need to do in my research is compensate for that and read books by people who are more optimistic about human nature. So I compensate for my confirmation bias. By being aware, you can start suddenly becoming rational.
I can imagine that writing something like the 48 Laws of Power, you might have to come up and be like, I need some good news today. Where can I go and see some people having fun or being happy and not undercutting and backstabbing each other when you're buried in that kind of research?
Yeah. Actually, I had a lot of fun writing the 48 Laws of Power. It was not depressing at all because I was able to get out all of my spitefulness about people. I operate by a lot of anger. I have anger, yes I do, anger and resentment about people, particularly as I said earlier, about people's holier than thou mentality where they think they're so superior. Because I'm a leveler, I really want to pierce that sense of superiority that people have. So writing the 48 Laws of Power was great fun for me. You know?
So we're both levelers. That must be why we get along so well.
Yeah, that's true.
I'm not trying to cut anything. You're not trying to cut. We're both trying to cut other people. I got you. Yeah. It's good to be aware of that. It is so interesting, and I love the fact that animals feel fear and it goes away. That was like a brilliant switch that went off when I read that, because humans, we dwell on that fear. Not only does it stay with us for a while and influence our actions, cause us to do things, but we actually use it to write rules about the way we'll react to something the next time it happens.
Right.
So when we have this happen as a kid and we're afraid of, I don't know, not being seen,
right.
It's like this little line that gets jotted, this line of code that gets jotted into your operating system shows up when you're a teenager, and then you really lean into athletics so that you get some attention, and since you're getting attention, you're using it to get women, and since you're getting women, it's making you feel good, so you get addicted to that, and then ... you're trying out for parts on NCIS Chicago in LA somewhere.
I didn't follow all that. That was pretty brilliant.
That's where I took it. That's where I took it.
Interesting.
Just because these little seeds get planted based on my dad was never home, so it must mean that I'm not worth seeing. Well, I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to prove that I'm worth seeing. Look at me, I'm on TV now. And your dad goes, why didn't you become a carpenter and do something useful? And then you're just, the rift is still there.
Right.
I can see that in a lot of people.
Yeah, I have an example in there that I used where, let's say you're a boy and your mother is kind of cold to you, right? Isn't as loving as you'd want. It's a bit narcissistic. And as a child, you experienced that as she was abandoning you. She wasn't giving you something that you wanted. And it created tremendous fear, like you were talking about in a 3-year-old. Like an adrenaline rush of fear that you were about to be abandoned by the one person who can keep you safe in the world. And then you grow up with this person who carries that deep within, this continual fear of being abandoned by other people, right? And that motivates everything that you do. And then later you're in a relationship with a woman and she just says something with a sort of an edge of coldness, maybe she's in a bad mood, and you interpret it, she's about to abandon me. She's losing interest in me. And you overreact and you get emotional and you end up breaking up the relationship. You're not aware of all of these little hidden layers of things that are occurring inside of you. You're not aware of the source, that you are the one causing other people to flee you because you're afraid that they're going to abandon you. You have to abandon them first so you feel like you're in control. It becomes the pattern of your life. It's irrational, but you don't see it that way. You see, in that moment when she was acting cold, man, I'm the most rational person in the world. I'm anticipating her leaving me. What could be more rational than I realize she's going to abandon me and I'm going to break it off? But you don't realize that it's extremely irrational, that it comes from a very emotional place.
I used to work with somebody that was abandoned by the mother as a child. And what he would then do is try to control everyone around him, which drove us all crazy. And as soon as someone started doing what he didn't like, he would try to socially isolate them, not invite them to things, make them feel bad. And when that happened to everybody turn by turn, we just decided.
How did
we've
you
had
know
it with
this about
guy.
his childhood?
He told us eventually, yeah. And I never really put those two things together, but when I read The Laws of Human Nature, I went, this is what he's doing. He's trying to control people so they won't abandon him. He's forcing them to feel abandoned when they don't do what he wants because that he knows that's what hurts the most, or at least in his world.
Right.
So then he uses that to control. But normal or healthier people or people who don't have that programming, we don't respond well to that. We just go, this guy is a crazy ass.
Well, see, this is the process that I'm asking you to go through when you're reading this book. This is how I'm hoping the book will change you. You probably already thought this way to a degree. But normally you go through life reacting to what just people give you.
Right.
You see that boss who's a control freak, and you get emotional and you get sucked into all the drama, and you're continually responding to the appearances that people present, not realizing that something else is going on in their head behind the mask. And when you suddenly start to peel away the layers and understand what motivates people and see that at the root could be some childhood trauma or some other issue they're dealing with, suddenly it changes, right? You now have options. You now realize, I don't have to get emotional. Maybe this isn't somebody I want to work for. You have options in life, and that's the key to this game. Instead of always reacting to people in which you have no options, that's the only thing you can do is get angry or resentful or envious. I'm showing you, you can go one of 3 or 4 ways. You can cut that person out of your life. You can not take them personally and say, oh, that's just who they are, that's fine. You can find a way to kind of minimize the damage that they're doing by becoming strategic and taking certain actions to prevent them from harming you, on and on and on. You have options in life instead of always reacting emotionally.
I love the idea of resisting emotional pull. This is from the book as well. It's like resistance training. When you feel, I really want to do this with this person, or I'm really excited about this, or I really want to hire this person, maybe step back and resist it for a little while, because resisting our emotions is like lifting weights.
Yeah.
It gets easier after a while. It's so tempting in the moment to go,
Yeah.
no, we're good. This is great. I'm going to sign on the dotted line.
Right.
Let's get married in Vegas kind of thing. And then that resistance that you build, that ability to resist your emotions, is actually quite a good skill to have.
Yeah. I don't want to create a misconception that I suddenly think that I feel that emotions are bad.
Of course, yeah.
It would be ridiculous to say that, because our ability to think is interconnected with our emotions. Einstein discovers the theory of relativity because he's so excited and emotionally involved in solving this problem that he's able to think about it so for hour after hour. If you're not motivated and love something, you're not going to learn about it. Emotions play a very valuable part in our life. We are very rich, emotionally rich animals. People like to think that what separates us from a dog or a cat is that we think, but actually you could say what separates us from the dog or the cat is that we feel a range of 20, 30 emotions that they're not even able to think, to process. And that's what makes us human. So emotions aren't necessarily bad, but who is governing the ship? There's a metaphor I use in the Rationality chapter of the rider on the horse. The horse is your emotions. It is more powerful. The horse is more powerful than the human animal. It's faster, it's stronger, it's more powerful. We are the rider on top of it. Is it the horse that's governing it, taking us everywhere we want without us controlling it at all, making us get into porn and going into video games and
That damn horse.
and dating the wrong people and making bad decisions? Or are we the rider that has the reins that can master that horse? Mastering that horse doesn't mean beating it to death and making it stand still. You want that horse to move. It's active, it's alive, it's powerful. Think of all the things that we've been able to do once we learned how to use horses, in war, etc. You want that animal to be able to move, but you want to be able to guide it. You want reins, you want a degree of control. You want to be a bit of a master of your emotions so you can use them. You use that example of choosing the wrong person to marry, like I'm going to marry her in Vegas that you just met. One of the most important chapters in the book is about the ability to judge people's character, right? The ability to see deep within them and to see that core of their being and what governs their behavior and what makes them repeat the same kind of patterns of behavior over and over again. And when you're constantly going around just reacting to what people do, looking at their face and getting charmed by them or getting pissed off about them, you're not seeing what's really going on. And so you'll end up hiring people because they're charming or pleasing or have a good resume. Or you'll end up marrying someone because they flatter you and they make you feel good about this or the other. And then you get into the relationship and you see something really ugly and dark that you hadn't anticipated. And you blame them for deceiving you. But in fact, the source of the problem is you. You're not able to judge people's character. You're simply reacting to the appearances they present. So that's another bit of resistance training that you're talking about.
How do we assess or begin to assess character via someone's behavior? That's a huge question, I realize.
Well, understand that people, I say in this chapter, people never do anything once. We are compulsive animals that continually repeat the same behavior, right? I know in writing my books, I'm writing this is my 6th book. I'm going, damn it, I'm not going to repeat this. I'm not going to make 8,000 note cards with extraneous information. I'm going to stop wasting my time. And what do? I do it again. I create even more note cards. I fall into the same pattern. I can't control it. It's compulsive. There's something deep within it. I could trace it back to something in my childhood, to some insecurity, to some need to do more than is required in my work. But I have patterns I can't control. Everybody around you has these kinds of patterns. I say that there's something genetic about it. It's in their DNA. It's how their brains are wired. They can't help doing certain patterns. And it's also their childhood, their parents, their upbringing, the level of attachment with their parents. There's something very deeply ingrained in their character. And you want to have the ability to assess it. So first of all, particularly in a relationship whether you're hiring a business partner or a romantic relationship, you want to be able, you looked at Jen.
I'm looking at my wife just to see if she's paying attention. Hopefully she's not paying attention to this part.
Okay. You want to pay extra attention to patterns you've heard from them in the past. If Jen tells you that her last boyfriend was such an asshole who abused her and she got rid of him, but then you also discover that the same thing about the prior one and the one before that, you might begin to think that maybe she's not telling the right story. Mm-hmm. Maybe it's something having to do with her own behavior that has been causing this, right? So you want to see patterns that people reveal. No one ever is completely opaque. You can see the patterns from what they've done in the past. There are some people who deliberately attract the wrong person in their life.
For sure.
So that they can have lots of drama and can complain about it. And then you'll only see the drama and you'll see them complaining. You won't realize that they're actually partially or completely the source of the drama that's going on.
You do have different types of characters that you outline. I don't know is character is the right word. It's kind of like spotting these different archetypes. Are these people dangerous? How do we identify our own?
Yeah.
I would love to hear more about these archetypes, because I think whenever we have categories or characters we can assign, it makes assigning them to people a little bit, it's easier to put people in buckets than to have all these nebulous values that
Right.
magnetize to them.
Well, I'm kind of obsessed with typology, with figuring out what kind of type a person is and seeing commonalities with other people that I've known in life and that I've read about in history. And so I make the case that some people are toxic. And what I mean by that is they have deep levels of insecurity and issues stemming from a troubled, damaged childhood, usually. And they have patterns that are pretty negative and destructive. They have a need to sabotage other people or to sabotage themselves. And getting involved with someone like that can really ruin your life. You get sucked into their dramas. They kind of control the dynamic. They feed off of controlling you by all of the emotions that they can stir up. So I want to give you a kind of a roadmap for identifying some of these toxic types before they become entangled in your life. See some classic signs of that. So I don't know if you wanted to go over some specific
I would love
types.
to, yeah. What's maybe the most dangerous or the most common / dangerous that you see?
Well, I talk in the narcissism chapter about the deep narcissist. And I maintain in this book that we're all self-absorbed by nature. And I explain why we're self-absorbed, why we are all narcissists. This is a concept that people don't automatically accept. In fact, I think a lot of people resist. We want to think that's the narcissist out there. Donald Trump, he's a narcissist, but I'm not. No, we're all narcissists. We are all on that spectrum. We all think first and foremost of ourselves. But some people are so low on the spectrum, they're so deeply narcissistic that they cannot ever rise up. They can't think of other people. Their need is to constantly have attention. So normally, our way of dealing with our own self-absorption and our own need for attention from other people is to create a self that we love, that we respect. We like ourselves to some degree. We think that we're worthy of something. And whenever something bad happens, we're at least able to revert to this idea that we're actually a person that is good, that we love. A deep narcissist doesn't have that sense. They can't get attention or validation or a feeling of security from themselves. It can only come from other people. So they become masters at getting attention from being very dramatic, from stirring up a lot of trouble, so that the attention comes to them. And they can be extremely dangerous once you get entwined with them, because people who are deep narcissists don't view you as a human being. They view you as an object that they can use to further their agendas. And so they can cause a lot of trouble in their life.
You wrote that we always have to work with other people. When we're influencing somebody or we're relating to somebody, we always have to work within their self-esteem or their concept of self, right? Or their
Self-opinion.
self-image. Yeah. And if they think they're worthy or they're not worthy, we have to agree with this. So if someone thinks, I'm not a good person, I'm not worthy, I have low self-esteem, we can't convince them otherwise. And they'll be attracted to people who confirm this opinion of themselves. And I saw this when I used to go out a lot and I used to teach other guys, and men and women for that matter, dating skills and things like that. And we used to go out to bars early 10 years ago in my 20s. I actually found this truth out in kind of it was sort of a sad truth for me, because I realized that I would talk to a lot of healthy, cool, vibrant women, and we would have a really great time, and I'd make great friends with them. And I'd also meet some very unhealthy, emotionally unhealthy women who clearly had bad childhoods, they
Right.
dated bad guys. And if I went there and I was nice and charismatic and did things for them and treated them like a normal human being and was a good friend, it didn't work at all.
Right.
What worked, unfortunately, and I couldn't do this routinely because it felt too bad and too ugly. If you treated them poorly and you didn't show up sometimes and you didn't tell them why and you didn't call them and you weren't vulnerable and you weren't emotional and you didn't do anything for them, there was a certain group of women that would respond to that so strongly.
Yeah.
And I thought, oh my gosh, this is terrible for you.
Yeah.
Why are you doing this?
Right. Yeah, I see what you mean. Well, the idea that I have in there is that people have an opinion about themselves, and you must be extremely aware of this. This is one of the most critical laws of human nature. Um, and I say that there are three universals for this opinion of ourselves. We usually like to think that we're autonomous and independent, that we make our decisions with our own willpower, that we're not forced to doing what we do. When I bought that new car, it's because I loved it, not because advertising. We also like to think that we're intelligent. We may not think that we're Einstein, but we know our field. We're not stupid. The sense that we're stupid or that people are making fun of our intelligence is pretty difficult for us to accept. And third, that we're generally a good person. We have good intentions, we're kind, we're angelic, we're not mean-spirited or ugly. People want to feel those three qualities about themselves. But then there's the flip side. There are people who don't have that, who feel that they're not worthy, that they're not so intelligent, that they're not a good person, right? They walk around with this opinion and it dominates their thinking. It becomes who they are. Your idea of yourself becomes who you are. Beyond those three universals, there are some other ones, like you might think that you're really independent, a maverick, a rebellious type, and that's who you are, right? And that becomes kind of your attitude towards life.
It's like a brand.
Yeah. Okay. So this defines you, and it determines what you choose in life, what you buy, the people you surround yourself with. If you believe that you believe in masculinity and in kicking ass and showing that you're tougher than other people, but you're also a Christian for whatever reason because of your upbringing, you will glom onto ideas of Christianity that reflect that. So you'll think Jesus is a warrior, God is a fighter. I'm out there kicking ass for Christianity.
Kick ass for Jesus.
Kick ass for Jesus. So your self-opinion will determine a lot of what you do. And if you go around in life challenging people's opinion of who they are, you're going to have a lot of misery and trouble. You won't get very far. So if you say something that questions their autonomy and makes them feel like they were manipulated, or you say some remark that in an argument you make them feel like they're stupid, or you make a remark that makes them feel like they're not a nice person, a door will close to you that will never open again. You will have made a silent enemy, right? And with this other example, with this person, this woman who has a negative opinion of themselves, if you are saying, oh, you're really great, you deserve this, that, or the other, it won't jive with how they think about themselves. And they'll think you're a fool, they're an idiot, right? We've all had the experience of feeling depressed and life isn't very fair and we're not doing very well. And then someone comes and says, oh, well, come on, the sun is shining, everything's great, you're really wonderful. And we don't like to hear that because it's not what we feel right now. We feel something else. They're trying to almost argue against, the mood of the moment. So you need to be aware that people have their own inner reality, their own way of thinking about themselves. And instead of inadvertently challenging it, you want to validate their opinion of who they are. That gives you room now to influence and move them. So if you make them feel comfortable, if you make them feel that they actually are a good person, that they are intelligent, that they are autonomous and independent, they will lower their resistance to you. And now you have room to infiltrate another idea. So to take, for example, that person that has low self-esteem, if you don't fight it and you say, you're right, people that have not treated you well, you haven't gotten a lot of good things in life, your life has been really hard. And then they say, yeah, and there's a connection, and they feel like that you're understanding them. Now you can insinuate a comment that can help try and maybe raise their self-esteem. Yes, that's true, but you actually have done this, that, and the other in your life, and it's not so bad. If you begin by confirming that they have had a rough time and that it's right that they feel kind of bad about themselves, now you can start saying something else. They're not so resistant to you, and they're open to another possibility. This is the golden key to unlocking people's natural resistance to you. If you always approach them as an individual with their own opinion about themselves, You try and unlock it and see how you can validate that opinion and how you can feed what they want to hear. There's nothing ugly or manipulative about it, because people do need this validation, this recognition. We're hungering for it, and you're giving it to them. It also gives you the power to influence them and move them in the direction that you want.
A lot of people might think, oh, this is manipulative. Look, listen to him talk. He's talking about infiltrating thoughts into people's heads. Even though he says it's for good, he could easily use it for bad. I think one of the insights from the book that I gleaned was everybody craves influence or power in some way.
Right.
There's a certain group of us, maybe the majority, that think that that's maybe wrong somehow. And then there's a small number of people that think, I'm going to do that. I deserve to have that. And unfortunately, I think a lot of the people that would use this stuff responsibly are in the bucket of folks that say it's wrong to want to be able to influence people
Right.
and to get under their defenses.
Well, it's absurd. It's the height of stupidity for people to think that they don't want that. They're not being honest with themselves. You don't want to go through life unable to influence your children, to have no effect on them. You don't want to go through life not being able to influence your boss and get them to give you a raise and get them to recognize your incredibly good work. You don't want to go around not able to influence your colleagues or people that you want to date. You fucking want influence. Stop being such a dishonest. Stop lying to yourself. Everything you do influences people, negatively or positively. People are reading you day in and day out like a book. They're reading your moods, your emotions, and they're saying, I like you, I don't like you. You are influencing them without realizing you're doing it, because we are animals that are responding to people in nonverbal ways, right?
Yeah.
So whether you want to or not, you are influencing people. You might just be putting them off. That's your influence. You might be repelling them. That's the kind of influence that you have. So it's, first of all, it's happening. You're just not in control of it. And second of all, you're not being honest with yourself. Do you want a child that you can't tell them what to do, that you can't mold to some degree, that you can't get rid of their ugly habits? You have a spouse who has terrible habits. They ignore you all the time. You don't want the ability to somehow get them to change? Give me a break, you know? I really can't stand that level of dishonesty that people have. You want the power to influence people. It's an incredibly deep human need. Just stop lying to yourself and admit it. And then you can use this for positive purposes. So if I'm telling you, Jordan, you know, you think I was being dishonest, but I wasn't. You're a really great interviewer. You have really good sense of empathy. You know, I can feel like a human connection with you. But there was that one moment, you know, in the interview where I felt you kind of lost it, sort of thing. And maybe next time you interview, you can try that. Well, suddenly, okay, you think I'm being manipulative, but I'm trying to help you. I'm trying to tell you that there was something you did in the interview that wasn't quite right. Now, if I directly said, Jordan, I didn't like what you did that one time, you say, fuck, Robert is being, you know, fuck that, I'm not going to listen. But if I say first something real and true, that you are a good listener, that you're a great interviewer, but here's one thing that you could have changed, that might open you up to it. It might have an impact on you. That's the power I'm telling you, you know, that anybody can have. And it's not ugly or manipulative.
In closing, there's a couple of really good practicals that I think I'd love to leave people with. One that I don't even remember what this was in the book, but this just stuck out so much. I recited it from memory in my notes. If you need a favor, don't remind people what you've done for them in the past. Remind them of what they've done for you in the past. So instead of saying, hey, you owe me one because XYZ, you actually say, you've done all these great things for me, and sort of programming, reinforcing that they're so generous.
Yeah.
Right? I thought that was a little counterintuitive and interesting.
Well, it's a theme in a lot of my books, particularly 48 Laws of Power. There's an African proverb that I quote in there that says, when you see someone being grateful, you will also notice water running uphill. I didn't quote it very accurately, but the idea is that gratitude is extremely unnatural for the human being. You'll find it as often as water running uphill. We don't like to feel grateful because in gratitude, there's a sense of inferiority. Like that person, oh, we're just this little child that they had to help and pat on the head and give us something. that we don't, that they're just patronizing us. They're doing something. We're not able to get it on our own. We don't like to feel that way. We like to feel that we can get things on our own, that if someone did us a favor, it was because we deserved it, that we're really a good person. So gratitude, we're always going around life thinking people should be grateful for what we did for them. We lent them money, we did this favor for them. And then we don't get it and we're disappointed. But it's extremely rare and an uncommon emotion to have. But the opposite factor is if you're trying to influence somebody, so you want them to do you a favor, instead of reminding them, as I said, of what you've done for them, you remind them of what they've done for you. So you're fed their self-opinion. Their self-opinion is, I'm a great, generous, kind person. I did something good for you. Now I'm motivated to keep up that opinion you have of me and keep doing good things for you. Do you see the logic in that?
Yeah, this makes a lot of sense, right? You're, like you said, reinforcing their opinion of the type of opinion they want to feel about themselves.
Right.
So you're giving them an opportunity to reinforce the person they want to be, which is generous and giving.
Right, as opposed to, look, I did that favor for you, meaning I was so much better than you. I helped you when you were a weak, dependent person. And you don't want to feel like that. You don't want to feel like, oh, all right, I owe my success or anything good because what you did for me. So now I have to do that again. I have to feel grateful again and do something for you. No, but that's really a turnoff. But if you do the opposite way, then it's extremely powerful. Of course, you have to set this up so that people have done you favors in the past,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that is the Benjamin Franklin
Benjamin
effect.
Franklin, very good. Wow, you're smart. Mastery.
It's all because of you. Yeah. Is that where I got that from?
Yeah,
Mastery?
you got that from Mastery.
Yeah, I remember that.
So Benjamin Franklin had this inveterate enemy in Congress or wherever it was who hated his guts and was going to make life miserable for him. And he knew that this guy was a great collector of rare books, etc. And so he went and lent this book to him, right? And now that made the guy think that, oh, Benjamin Franklin isn't such a bad person because he likes me. And because he likes me, maybe I should try and like him. So it's counterintuitive kind of thing. Instead of trying really hard to please this man and do things, say things to ingratiate him, he lent him this very nice book and made the guy think that his opinion of Benjamin Franklin was wrong.
Right. It was, you've got all these great things, you've got all these great books. I really look up to you. I would love if you would be generous and show me this. And the guy did. And then, of course, then he has to rationalize the rest of his opinion
Right.
based on the fact that he did this nice thing for him. I
Right.
must have done that because I liked him.
Right.
So I guess I like him. Maybe I should act in accordance with me.
That's what will
him.
happen if you do favors for other people instead of the other way around.
So all these favors that we're doing for other people are secretly trying to earn their goodwill. That's what this whole show is about. I'd be lying to myself and everyone else if I didn't admit that there is a level of, I love doing the show because I love the conversations. I do love helping people, but I also really like the idea that I'm able to provide this and other people kind of can't get it anywhere else, and that it sort of projects this idea that there's a source of wisdom that I've created with my team here, and that's sort of like, I guess, the dark side of it.
That's your self-opinion.
Yeah, and I like that, but it really did get highlighted when I read The Laws of Human Nature. I was looking at all these things I was doing and going,
Oh, you mean maybe it doesn't come from the best place?
Yeah, I don't know if it doesn't come from a good place, but reading The Laws of Human Nature will get you to look at the good things you do and think, why do I do this? But it will definitely get you looking at the bad things you do,
Right.
the vices that you have, the guilty things that you do, the things you're thinking about when you're shaving in the morning that you can't tell anyone else about because it makes you look bad. It'll make you put those under a microscope
But,
too.
I don't want people to think that that's like this something really heavy.
Oh, it's
and
not.
awful.
No, it's an entertaining, quick read as well.
Well, no, I don't mean that, but the sense of being honest with yourself, at first it might be painful. And some people who've reviewed the book and on Amazon, they say it's kind of painful because it makes you confront things about yourself you don't want to necessarily confront. But I think not being honest with yourself in the end, being someone who feels envious, being passive aggressive, you're not really happy. It's not really fulfilling. You're not really getting what you want. When you do passive aggressive digs at people or you're manipulative like that, you might get something in the immediate present from it, but people are pissed off, you've made enemies, and it doesn't feel good to be acting in this way. So when you're kind of being a hypocrite and pretending that you're so superior and smarter and nicer, I feel you pay a price for that. I feel it causes secret depression. I feel it causes you to alienate people that you don't mean to alienate, so that you don't have as many friends, and that the friends that you have, the bonds aren't very deep, right? So being honest with yourself will make you happier, I believe, in the long run. Acknowledging that you have a dark side, that you have a shadow, that you're not such a great person as you think, can actually be a very liberating feeling, you know? And there are ways to take that shadow and that darkness and kind of turn it into something else. But the sense that I'm happy with who I am, I acknowledge that I'm this complete person, that I have these qualities that aren't necessarily the best qualities. That kind of acceptance is, I think, a really deep and positive emotion. It gives you the chance to work on them, to kind of smooth out some of these rough edges that you have. And it'll make you a better person. It'll make you easier to deal with. We humans are really good at smelling out people who are hypocritical, right? Who pretend to be all holier than thou, saintly, and they're not. And it's a put-off. We're attracted to people who are authentic. We feel that person may not be a saint, but they're really who they are. We see that in our culture. We're attracted to people who are authentic, who are not disguising, who they show their dark side and their good side. It's very positive, kind of an attractive quality. So that's what I'm trying to create in this book. I'm not trying to weigh you down with making you feel, oh, I'm such a miserable worm. You know, you might be a worm, but it's better to admit that you're a worm and to kind of move from that. And I think people will smell that on you. They'll smell that you're being more honest and being more who you really are.
Even worms crawl out of the ground when it rains, right? So
That's
maybe this book is the good rain shower that we need.
That's a good metaphor, yeah.
If there's one thing I'm good at, it's metaphors. The rest of my skills are pretty mediocre.
I didn't say that, you did.
Robert Greene, thank you so much.
So, thank you, Jordan. Thank you.